Hey, vinyl signs are used pretty commonly in trade shows and various events and organizers and stuff. They're really great, but what do you do with them when you're done with them and like the event's over and you can't really use that sign anymore or your logo changes? I have made some bags out of some old vinyl and even old tablecloths. So I was going to show you how to do that, how I do it, including making the handles. And so join me on this upcycling adventure. First off, you're going to need some pieces of vinyl. For the main body, I use a piece that is 21 inches by 34 inches. And on the side, I cut out a section that is 4 by 7 on either side of that. So it ends up being about 13.5 inches to the middle here. This is after several trials going back and forth. And so this works with either a piece of vinyl or a piece of fabric, and that will get you the main body. For the handles, there's a pre-finished handle. You need 22 inches long by 3 inches wide or so. These handles end up being about an inch. So by making them 3 inches, that gives you enough to fold them over and then fold them under. And I'll show a little bit more of how that works. They're your pieces. They're your main pieces. 21 by 34 and 22 by 3. So this one you can see is just a little longer, just 1 inch longer. And you could probably go with longer or shorter handles if you really needed to. Or whatever you like. You can see this one, you can kind of make it out that it says sponsored. Or sponsored by was kind of the section that it got pulled out of there. Once you have your 22 by 3 inch piece, you fold it over in half. That's kind of the easiest way. With vinyl, you can pretty much just fold it. With fabric, you probably want to iron it. And then what you do is fold in a little bit on each side and make a nice little, about 1 inch wide. Doesn't have to be perfect since this won't be running through anything. But use these clips. I'll link to these clips down in the description so you can get them. Just got them off Amazon. Not too expensive, and they work really well. Once you've got 2 straps made, then it's time to get on to sewing. Once you've got all your pieces folded and all your clips put on your handles, what we're going to do is sew down. And this is just a regular, standard home sewing machine. And what we're going to do is sew down the side without the clips, and then sew all the way around and remove the clips as we go. So I'll do a little zoom in on that. I always like to backstitch at the beginning if I can, just to help it stay in. That's pretty ugly. I should say I've got this set to kind of the longest stitch I can, and it just goes straight. There's no zigzag or anything to this. Simplicity, I won't remove the piece. I'll get over to the other side. Maybe a little too far, but we can correct it. The ends are going to get attached to something, so it's okay if you don't get them quite right. They'll be mostly hidden. Well, not hidden, but they'll be, we're going to get stitched again. This is also harder because there's a lot more layers in here. There's actually going through 4 layers. I don't really have to turn this again, but it can be. And then there you go. Undo it. Make sure it's all good. Pull this tight. And snip. And there you go. You got one handle. All done. You can see it's pretty good. I tried to match the color of the thread to the color of the material, but you don't necessarily have to. It's got a little bit of a wobble to it, but that's kind of how it goes. And you got to remember, these are going to get folded up and put on the bag like that. You got to think about it. So a little bit of wobble's not really that big of a deal. You'll be able to reverse it, put it whichever way it kind of feels right. But let's do the other one. Now we're on to the main part of the bag. So here's our material. And what we're going to do is fold the outsides basically together. This will become the inside. And what I'm going to do is clip this along the sides. What you want to do is make sure that your edges, your corners, these will become the bottom corners. Make sure these are all aligned. So let me pin those. And then what we'll do is just sew up the outsides. Not across the bottom, just those outside bits. Doesn't matter what thread color you use because this will all be hidden inside after we do the top stitching and the other stuff on the side, but you'll see that. Speed this up. So. Now that we've got those sides done, we have the most challenging part of really the whole bag, and that is to top stitch the sides. This is really just difficult because getting the bag in there so that it can be on the needle and be fed through is kind of challenging. It would be kind of optional, or this is optional. You could just press this. You could get an iron and press it out, but to really kind of hold it in that position, have something physical holding it open, you really need to top stitch it. And all top stitching is folding the seam open and then running a stitch along like that seam, or right next to that seam on either side, on one side or the other. One way to do it is to, or maybe the preferred way, I don't really know, I'm not really a sewer, is to stitch it so that it's holding that flap together. So it'll actually be going through 3 layers of vinyl. That's kind of hard to see there, but you see how that folds over. And so if you get it on the same side, it'll stitch a little better. Otherwise, you're really just kind of stitching through a single piece. So you want to stitch through whichever way you fold it. That's really the way you want to do it. Otherwise, I don't think it's really doing anything. So you want to pick a side, fold it over. Probably the right way to do it is to press it, but with this vinyl being as stiff as it is, it seems to be that if you just kind of, you can really fold it because it's almost a solid like that. It's not, some of the fabrics you kind of want to press because they won't hold that fold as well. But if you just kind of physically fold this vinyl, just kind of push it with your hands. Also, I use the box from the little clips and I'll press that. You can top stitch it. Now, you could turn it, you can try to turn it inside out and get to it. That sometimes works, but I find it can be easier in the long run to do this. And so, you see here, you just have to kind of work it. So, let me work on that and I'll show you the struggle. I'll speed this up a bit so that you don't have to see all of it, but you'll see how this gets to be kind of a challenge. Well, there you go. Not too bad. That actually was one of the easier times I've had with this. Maybe doing this a lot kind of gets me started. And I did change the thread out, so it would be, in this case, red thread. So you can kind of see that. It hides it a little better. Now, if you wanted to make it contrasting on purpose, that's another way to go. So now, let me do that with the other side. One little tip here is to try to flatten it out. It's kind of hard to see in there, but I'm trying to flatten it out, flatten out that seam as much as I can, and then I'm reaching under and feeling to make sure that the flap is over the correct direction as I'm stitching. So kind of keep that in mind. It's a little hard to see that I'm doing that, but kind of flatten that out because there's really no way to press it and then just run it through. You have to kind of work it as you go, so you'll see these little pauses. So there you go. Yeah, pretty good. A few little bad spot, but nothing too horrible. So then what we're going to do is fold the edges flat. So you've got your bag, you've got these holes, and then what you do is fold it up so that the seam is right in the middle and it's even. So what you can do is kind of look at both edges and see if it looks like you've basically got the slits kind of even, and so it'll have kind of that look to it. And then I usually just clip it a little bit. It's not a huge long thing, but something to just hold it. And then we'll run that, and we'll do that to both sides. So try to even that out so it's about even. clip it and sew it. Thread color here doesn't matter. So if you want to swap again, I probably should, but it's not going to use that much. Now the fun part is we've got a bag, but it would normally be considered inside out. Now you could just sew it opposite to this and basically attach your handles and be done, but then all your stitching is on the outside, which is not how our modern society likes bags to be. So we will now flip it inside out, which is not too hard on a bag like this. Let's see how it goes. What you can see here is, because of that top stitching, it actually holds its shape pretty well and kind of sits open. If it didn't have that top stitching, it would curl in a lot more. What you could do at this point is basically take our handles and attach them. But it'd have this kind of raw edge. So what we're going to do is fold this over about an inch. I don't really measure it anymore, but kind of eyeball it about an inch. And what you're going to do is fold that over, and once that's folded over, take your handles, and you want to be thoughtful about how you orient these, because you may want it to be where they can flip like this. You see, if you do it one way, they'll be kind of flat and they'll kind of fold there. If you do it this way, then they form, the handle kind of sticks out. So think about that orientation. And then where you put it is kind of up to you. You don't want to go too wide, but you don't want to go right next to each other either. So you kind of split the difference and just do whatever looks good. What you really want to do is, probably, but you know, it's up to you, is make sure they match the other side. So usually what I do is I place them on one side, clip them, and then use those as a reference point to the other side. You know, fold it on the seam on the side, line up those, and then line up the other handle just so that they're even. So it's not an exact placement, but it's at least consistent. So let me pin that up and then I'll show you how that looks. Okay, here we are, all pinned up. We've got those there. You can see I kind of clipped both sides of the bag. You can see if I fold it together basically on the seam, they line up. If you clip it like this, you can actually kind of walk around with it. You can put a lot of stuff in it because these are just clipped on, but these little clips are actually pretty strong. There's a link for them down in the description where you can get them. They sell them all over. Yeah, Amazon of course has them. But you can kind of try it out and kind of see, is that right? You can play around with it, move it out just a little bit more. You could put them at the other ends if you wanted to do something and put it on the seam. Like, that's the nice thing about doing your own bag, is you can really place a lot of things wherever you want. You could also even put a zipper down this if you wanted to make it into more of a purse. It kind of looks like a big purse at this point. You could put a pocket in it. Some of the EDC2 stuff, I've got other videos on that. You can look up EDC2 tips and see some stuff there. You could put reinforcement wire in it. You'd have to leave gaps for this particular bag, or put another layer kind of on the EDC like they have on the EDC2. Sorry for all the rambling, but you can see that goes there. You can see how the handles kind of fold, and like, are they going to be coming together, or they're easy to hold. And yeah, looks good. So now stitching it up, The real challenging part, I usually start on one of the ends just because it's less noticeable usually, is you can stitch around the top first or stitch around the bottom first and then go back and stitch around the top. I would usually stitch around the top first. I think I'll try stitching around the bottom first just to see what that's like, and I'll let you know afterwards. The hard part about stitching on the bottom is you really have to do it on the inside of the bag so that you can make sure not to be going over, so that you're actually getting between, near the bottom of this and going out. So kind of stitching on the inside, but let's see how it goes. So now I've run along the whole bottom, and that actually worked really well. Usually the challenge is when you get to the handle, you have to remove the clip before you move one side of the clip and almost the other side too, and then kind of hold it and really keep it positioned. Because there's enough clearance there, I was able to just sew along that edge, as you could see, without having to remove really any of the clips. So now I'll go back and probably just leave the clips on there just to hold it a little bit, together, but I'll run around the top edge, and I can do this one from the outside, so it should be really easy, and it'll go along those handles and stitch it all up, and then we'll be done. And there you have it. The bag is done. This is now a well reinforced. I don't know if you noticed, I ran a couple extra stitches over the handles, kind of went back and forth a couple of times, just a little bit to add a little reinforcement there. You could do a little reinforcement in the corners if you wanted, another row of stitches along there. That's the great thing about making a bag yourself, is you can kind of pick which areas you want to reinforce, how you want to build it, the colors, the handle placement, all that kind of stuff, and you can make a bag that you want exactly. Anyway, that's enough rambling on my part. Like and subscribe, share this video. What else would you like me to see make from a vinyl bag? Is there some pattern that you can find online? Link it below in the comments, and maybe I can make it and show you tips and tricks to making whatever pattern you want me to make. I love taking on new challenges. So have a good one.